Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. How are you? Are you alright? How is weather? It's fine today. Sunny? Is it cloudy? How is it? Is it raining outside? Or it's misty? Tell me, how is the weather? Oh, it's dark. Huh? I mean, it's cloudy outside. Oh, there are dark clouds. Fine. It's thundering. Oh no, it's hot. Okay, fine. There are some pictures and you can see, I mean, after seeing this picture, you can tell whether the weather is what? Cloudy, misty, muggy, right? Or it's cold, it's chill, fine, it's snowy. What is it? Or it's very hot, right? So, of course, yes, we are lucky that we are blessed with 4 weathers, right? In Pakistan, we have summer, we have a long summer, we have winter. Yes, in hilly areas, we may have long winter, and we have autumn, and then we have definitely spring. Yes, the best of all weathers in Pakistan. So we are fortunate that we enjoy all the 4 seasons, all the 4 weathers in Pakistan. Fine. So once you would be here, I mean, in this semester, maybe it's what? Yes, it's maybe you know, it's hot, right? Yeah. Or maybe autumn is going to start, right? Or maybe once you would be in the semester, it would be cold winter. So yes, but the good thing is that we enjoy all the 4 weathers. So the students, come back to, all right, so we, in fact, in the last lecture, which lecture we had in last, which lecture number exactly? It was lecture number 8, okay? All right, so we talked about, what did we talk about? Okay, we talked about lesson planning. Good. Did you make a lesson, or did you plan a lesson for your class? You did. Good. Good. So today we are going to talk about some classroom teaching techniques that, of course, we are going to be future teachers, right? We will be teaching English as a foreign language. So definitely once you teach, you need methods. But once there are methods, of course, I mean, we need some techniques, we need some activities under some principles. Right, students? So we will be talking about some activities or in this lecture and in the coming lecture. So before that, as usual, what we have to do, we have to review the last lecture. And we discussed in the last lecture, my dear students, that lesson planning reflects preparation of a teacher. If a teacher of a foreign language or other teaching brings a lesson with him, so it shows that the teacher is prepared for the class, right? Because when you make your lesson plan, you do your homework, right? So doing homework means here that you prepare, you give time, right? So giving time to that lesson, what? Helps your learners to learn that language, and helps you to execute, to manage that class in the best way. So lesson plans, in fact, it has dual purpose. It has many advantages, right? It gives it in fact benefits the teacher, the one who has made that lesson plan, and it also benefits the learners, right? People who come to learn that language. So lesson plan is very important for a good language teacher, particularly when you start your career in teaching, and particularly teaching English as a foreign language. So you need to work on your lesson plans. And I told you in the last lectures that good institutions, they ask you to make lesson plans for a week. So when you start your career, So if you are teaching, so you every day you have to make a lesson plan, and later on once you become experienced person, so then what you do, then the template is with you and you can insert information, you can in fact add information in the template that you have, or sometimes organizations provide you that template. So this is what a lesson plan is about, that and we talked about that what should be in a lesson plan, and we discussed that aims are there, of course, right? And we also differentiated between aims and objectives, that what is the aim of that particular lesson, and considering that those aims in mind, you decide on the procedure, right? What would be the sequence? How would you start your lesson? What would be in the presentation stage of a lesson? What would be in the practice stage of a lesson? Similarly, what would be in the subsequent phases of your lesson plan? So once you keep aims in mind, then you decide on procedure, and of course while keeping procedures in mind, you think of what activities would be suitable for your learners. So this is what we saw, and then we also saw that what were the physical constraints to a lesson plan, and we saw that time can be a physical constraint, because you see sometimes you are given more time for a lesson plan, and at times you see our class duration is 30 minutes, so we have to keep the time factor in mind, and this can be a physical constraint, physical in fact hindrance. And then we also saw the frequency of the classes in a week. If you meet your students once in a week, or if you meet your students twice in a week, and sometimes you meet your students 5 times a week. So if you meet your students, mean the frequency of classes is once a week. So for this, what you need to in fact review the previous lecture once you start a new lecture. So this is very important, that you need to know the time, and again exact time, in that when do you have your class, either you have the class in the morning, or class in the evening, or class in the afternoon. So that also helps you in teaching, and that also helps the learner in learning that language. So time is an important factor, my dear students, as far as lesson plan is concerned. And also we saw that syllabus, of course, and we also saw the management. In fact, at times management have some priorities, and we cannot put those priorities aside, right? So these are some of the factors we saw. And also we discussed that aids, teaching aids is important, that aids should be available, and if an institute does not have the required teaching aids, so again that can affect your lesson plan. Teacher is also important in a lesson plan, because the teacher is the one in fact who is an informant, right? And what he does, that he conducts the class. So while conducting the class, his role is important, his authority is important, and how to exercise his power is also very important. Fine. So this was all about our previous lecture. Today we were going to start a new lecture, and that is about classroom teaching techniques. A very important lecture, this one, and of course the coming lecture, the next lecture. Why? Because in these 2 lectures we will be talking about classroom teaching techniques. And dear students, you in fact need these techniques, right? And why do you need these techniques? To have an idea, right? Once you will come to know about these techniques, and I'm sure you must have heard about these techniques in the last semester as well. So these techniques in this semester particularly, you will learn how to use these techniques in your class. Now the question arises that why do you need these techniques? Answer is that we need these techniques so that once you teach language, your students, you can take these techniques as role models. You can take these techniques as in fact your model. Why? Because if you keep these techniques in mind, then you can design your own techniques as well. Why? Because these techniques in fact give you a guideline, right? And experts of TEFL have recommended these techniques, and of course teacher of foreign language have been using these techniques, and these techniques in fact prove to be successful, right? People who use these techniques in their the classes, so the learners really in fact learn, and they get benefited in fact from these techniques. So that's why we will be talking about these two techniques in this semester and in the coming semester. The point again that you must understand is that these techniques are there to give you an idea, to give you a model that you can in fact follow these techniques. But again, the point is that just knowing these techniques, right, may not serve your purpose. What you need to do is you need to keep these techniques as a model, and think of designing your own techniques in the class. So if you are a creative minded person, then you can have a better technique than these that we will be talking about. So these are the 4 techniques, right, that we will discuss in this semester and in this lecture, and of course the coming lecture, right? So lecture 9 we will be talking about the first 2, that is information gap activities for oral lesson, and then next one is discourse chains, third one is structuring conversation, fourth one is role plays. So these are the 4 techniques that we'll be talking about in these 2 lectures. So my dear student, what is information gap? If I ask you the question, so what would you say about information gap, right? You know what does gap mean, right? And what is information gap? Yes, can you answer? I remember we did talk about information gap in our last semester. So yes, information gap is when one person has more information than the other. All right, means that of course student Ali, for example, knows less than Zishan. If Zishan has more information, right, so Zishan in fact knows more than Ali, which means there is a gap, and this gap is fine. Which gap we call it? Information gap. For example, Zishan has been to Canada, so and Ali has never been to Canada. So there is information. Zishan in fact knows much about Canada. Zishan knows that how many provinces are there in Canada, and Zishan knows much about Ontario, one of the provinces. So on the other hand, Ali has never been to Canada, so Ali does not know about the provinces and about a prime minister and about in fact parliament and all that, right? So there is an information gap, right? So this is an activity that we use in our language teaching the classes, in our language teaching sessions. So once you have these activities, my dear students, so obviously you see students develop their taste, and of course they learn language in a real situation, in a real context. And the other one is, of course, the next one is discourse chains. Even discourse, you know what, of course, discourse what? That is conversation, that is discussion. And there is a discourse chain. In a chain, for example, it starts from me, it goes to Ali, and Ali to Zishan, and of course maybe it comes back to me. So discourse chain is another activity that of course we'll be talking about. And then of course structuring conversation. You know the conversation, how to structure conversation, and then we will see what is unstructured conversation and what is a structured conversation, and then at the end we will talk about role plays. So in this lecture we will talk about the first two activities, that is information gap activities and discourse chains, right? So dear students, what is information gap activities, right? So you know that communication is a two-way process. Now if I ask you what is communication, right? So I tell you that of course communication is from Latin language, and the word was communis, right? So communis meant to share, right? To share mean to exchange, right? Now the communication is what? It is the process of sharing by which what happens? Messages produce response. This is what communication. And you know that communication is not a one-way traffic, right? Communication is what? It is a two-way traffic. Now what is a two-way traffic, dear students? Yes, because in communication, the communicant and in fact communicator, right? There are two entities, they exchange their views, they exchange information, they communicate, right? So, and one of them is what? Communicator, the one who initiates, the one who starts this process of communication. And there is another person who receives and reply, is we call it communicant. So we see that communication is not a one-way traffic, it is not a single-way process, where it is a two-way process. So we see in the communication gap activities, what happens? It takes place between students, right? So one opinion is that it doesn't take place between a teacher and a student. Generally it takes place between students, so it's important, right? So what happens, in fact, though a teacher can certainly, teacher is there, right? He can demonstrate that activity, right? And how he can demonstrate that activity? That maybe for a role model, initially he can become an informant, he can act as a person who has more information, and then he can select somebody, any student, the best student in the class, as what? You see, the one who has less information. So this can be done. So this is in fact why a teacher in fact holds this activity, just to give an idea to the students, because at times what happens in language teaching, if you are exploiting an activity in the class and your students do not know about that activity, so that activity may be a failure in the class. So for that situation, what we do, we in fact, being a teachers, we demonstrate, right? We set a role model for the students, and once you do it, student can easily follow it. Students, so that is in fact the teacher can do that. So in information gap activities, what happens? The two students will be asking each other questions to which they don't know the answers, right? So these questions are called referential questions, right? We will see in the next slide what are referential questions. So what is the goal of this activity? For the students to discover certain information, whether about the other person or related to specific activity. For example, I gave you example earlier that there are two students, one has been to Canada and other has never been to Canada. The one who has been to Canada, and he knows, right, much about Canada. He knows there are 10 provinces in Canada, but the second person, in fact, you see, he has never been to Canada, so he cannot know, he doesn't know anything. So that's why what he does, that he asks questions to the person who has been to Canada and he replies. Or in other words, take a local example, if one student in fact lives in Islamabad and the other has never been to Islamabad, or he might have visited for once or twice. So definitely the one who lives in Islamabad, he knows more about Islamabad. He knows how many universities are there, he knows how many sectors are there, and he knows which sector is the best and which sector is in fact for the general public, and which sector is for industry people, and which sector is for what in fact you see executive class. So this is what you see. The one who lives in Islamabad, he knows it. So that's why, of course, in information gap activities, the goal is what? To exchange information. The goal is, of course, to let the students discover information. So I mean, this has two purposes. On one hand, students communicate in that language and they discover, they know about, you see, about the other person's expertise or other person's native place. And the others, I mean, who not only they improve their language, but they also talk about their, you see, they know about other person's culture and native place and so on and so forth. So that was, of course, one, in fact, important, the goal of this group, in fact, we call it information gap activities. For example, what student A says helps to shape B's reply. Fine, because definitely when Ali asks a question, what time is it? Right? Now the B replies, it is 5 o'clock or it is 5 p.m. So this B, in fact, the B, Zishan, replies to in fact Ali. So I mean, what time is it? How is weather today? So it is fine today. It is sunny today, right? So this is what we see in the information gap activities, that what Umar says, in fact, what mean, then Mumtaz, in fact, replies. So Umar's questions help Mumtaz reply. So which in turn what happens, influences A's answer and so on, right? So this is what happens in information gap activities. So here is, I told you that what is referential questions. So dear student, referential questions are the question you ask someone because you don't know the answer, right? For example, you are in a place, or you are of course visiting a city for the first time, right? You have never been to Multan, and of course somehow you have to be there in Multan. So you forgot the way, right? So you ask somebody, for a particular place. So in ELT classroom, particularly English language teaching classroom, this can mean questions. In fact, teachers ask learners and learners ask each other. It can be this way. In fact, if I ask you some questions and then you ask those questions to others, in fact, particularly in ELT classrooms. So referential questions can be compared to display questions, in fact, for which the answer is already clear and teacher asks just to see if the learner know the answer, or for a language manipulation, right? For example, how many chairs are there in the classroom? You see, so the teacher wants students to so that they would tell how to reply to these questions. Maybe in fact learners know number of chairs, but the teacher wants them how to reply to this question. They would say there are 30 chairs in the class, right? So in this way they would learn the structure, there are. Or the teacher asks, in fact, how many whiteboards are there in the class? So reply can be, there is one whiteboard in the class. See, so the structure is there are or there is, for example. Or if is there any dice in the class? So the students say, well, yes, there is one dice in the class. Again, this example, you can have a look. The teacher asks the learner, what did you do at the weekend? Fine. Or learner asks another, why are you so sad? See? So the teacher, asks the question and the students reply about their weekend, or the learners ask another student, one learner asks another learner, why are you sad? The answer is, I am sad because I am tired, in fact, because my friend is absent. This one is, of course, we can reply. In the classrooms, what? Extended activities in which learner can practice production of referential questions include quizzes, right? Setting and answering questions, interviews, discussions of work in the class, posting questions on general knowledge forums. So these are what, my dear students, we call them what? Referential questions. So those questions, in fact, which are asked in the class, right, in fact to increase information and also to improve language, right? So when one person knows more than the other does, so in this way they exchange information, right? B in fact improves his information and they both talk in English, so they improve their language as well. This is what we call referential questions. Now, dear students, that of course information gap activities for oral practice. So why are information gap activities useful? Now we have to see usefulness of information gap activities. What do you think, by the way? Why are they useful? Okay, they help learners to improve their information. Good, good. What else? They help learners to improve their shyness. All right, to overcome their shyness. Good, this happens. What else? Anything else? They help learners to improve their language. Good, good. So these are of course some of the benefits of in fact, what do you call them? Information gap activities. So information gap activities, they are useful because they are very meaningful. How they are meaningful, my dear students? Because when a student asks a question and he expects a reply, right? So the question itself is meaningful because question needs information. The question in fact is asked in a simple way, because student B would only reply if the question is clear. If the question is ambiguous, the question is unclear, so reply may not be possible. So that's why the questions are meaningful and the answers most probably they would be meaningful in fact. So all students are involved in the process equally and they are all moving towards a specific purpose. So this is main one, in fact you could say the benefit of information gap activities, that is what? It's meaningful, all students participate equally and they all move towards a specific purpose. So this is in fact first benefit, first advantage of group in fact information gap activities. Each student in information gap activities has the task of finding out certain information and therefore must find a way in which to ask for this information. Motivation is usually quite high in these activities. So I told you earlier that it's an information gap activity. So activity itself says that one person has more information and second person has less information. So what they do, they exchange information. What they do, they improve their language. So it has two purposes, right? So the point is that you see, you not only you improve your information but also you learn how to seek information and you learn how to give information about that questions. And these activities in fact help move the students from working in a more structured environment into a more communicative environment. See, because they work equally fine and they make environment ideal, communicative. They are in fact hopeful, using lots of target language and in the process discovering where they have gaps, knowing where their gaps are. In fact, see, in this way try to know, fine, because they try to know that where are the gaps, right? Where is information which in question needs information, so they try to fill in those gaps in fact. So these are of course what we say that you see why are information gap activities useful. So we saw that these are useful because in fact information is shared, language is learned, right, and everybody more or less participate, fine, and environment becomes conducive for communication. So there are some important points for information gap activities, right? I mean, discourse chains on the blackboard or on OHP or multimedia, because if you do that, students would easily see it and they could in fact use that. Fine. Or handouts can be provided. That saves your time. Choose 2 students on opposite side of the class, allot each of them the role of one of the speakers in the chain, and then ask them to go through their parts. Fine. This provides examples for whole class for what to do. I mean, initially, in fact, you can take 1 student from this part and 1 student from the other part. You can give them roles, in fact. You see the role of a teacher to 1 student and the role of a student to other. And they can change over. Fine. And once they do this, can be for the whole class. We do it for once. And you see, why it's controlled? Because the dialogues are given on the board or on the OHP. So the students would know. And then what other students would do, they can do in their pair works, right? That pair work can be open or closed. Each, in fact, either divide the class into closed pairs or ask them to practice the dialogue simultaneously. It can be done in either ways. So dear students, right, we talked about 2 important activities in this lecture. We talked about information gap activities, very important for language teaching classes, very important for teaching English as a foreign language. And again here I would say that these are the activities that give you an idea, a clue. You can in fact design your own activities, fine, in the light of the instructions given, right, in the light of this model. So for example, information gap activities, similarly discourse chains, right? So we talk about information gap activities for oral lesson, and then we talk about discourse chains, and we saw that information gap activities are useful because they are meaningful, and students in fact are involved in the process of equally, right? They equally involved in the process, and they're all moving towards a specific purpose. And important points are pre-teaching of vocabulary, clear instructions, demonstrations, mixed ability, use of the mother tongue, the teacher's role, etc. These are the points that we must keep in mind if you are using information gap activities in the class. Then we talked about discourse chains, right? A chain, a discourse that takes place between students. Teacher can demonstrate initially, but once the teacher in fact gives a demonstration between student A and a teacher, then others can in fact follow it. And then we saw in fact when to use these discourse chains and how to use them. This was all about these 2 activities. So in the next lecture, inshallah, we'll be talking about other 2 activities. Till then, it's time to say goodbye.